All right, thanks for tuning in. I was going to say turning in, but thanks for tuning in to Scar Stories, the podcast. My name is Nicole Golden. I'm the host, and I'm just really excited to have you guys here and introduce my next guest. This is Mike Brannan, and I know Mike because he is at the same counseling office as Kevin. So you guys know Kevin by first name now because I talk so much about him. But Mike, Brian and I actually came and saw you with Ryder once, and it was awesome. We really enjoyed our time with you. And in fact, like you opened up so much for us in understanding him that it was incredible. But I'm going to have Mike talk a little bit about his licensing. I got to get a grip here if we're going to do this. I got to try to pull it together here. His licensing, and then how long you've been in the counseling profession, Mike.
All right. Yeah. So once again, Mike Brannan. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I've seen that you've had some other mental health professionals as well, and
yes.
We all are kind of in the business of helping. My background is I grew up in Gainesville and went to University of Florida. So
okay, so I didn't know that, but this is an added bonus. All right.
Gator fan. Met my wife there. We got married and moved to Alabama, where she went to grad school. Now she's also a therapist, but she's a speech therapist.
Okay.
And so she works in the school system here.
Okay.
Came back to Florida, and I started working at a place called the Florida Cherokee Ranches, a group home for kids in the foster care system.
Wow.
Did camps, did foster programs for a long time, and got more interested in mental health and went back to grad school, which is where I met Dr. Hull. He was one of my professors, and I guess he liked me well enough. He asked me to join his practice. So I did that, and I've been here for about 9 years now. I am a Christian. I go to church on Sundays with my with my family. I am married, almost coming up on 20 years.
Good for you.
We've got 3 kids. My oldest is in high school, actually has his first soccer game tonight.
Nice.
And my youngest just started kindergarten, and my middle one is in 5th grade. So we've got a broad range.
Yes, you do. Holy smokes. I thought we were crazy having them so close together, but you may take the cake having them so spread apart. I mean, it's like, holy.
That's why I have so much gray in my beard and getting in my hair. So
I mean, you have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and someone in kindergarten. Oh my. Okay. Well, kudos to you. Awesome. Well, I am super excited about this interview because we're going to focus a lot on kids and families. It's funny because Kevin speaks so highly of you, and there's a lot of times where I'll call Kevin and be like, "Listen, I have this situation or this situation where I need someone to see someone," and he's always like, "Mike." Like, okay. But one of the things that Kevin speaks very highly about is your knowledge and just your ability to work with families and children. And we experience that even with Ryder. And so a lot of my questions are going to be centered around that. I sent them to you ahead of time, and I already told you, in case you guys see me looking at my phone, my kids have used all of our printer paper. So I had to look at all of my questions on my phone. So I'm not being rude and checking text. I'm actually reading the questions. All right. So the first one, I just got this message sent to me, and I thought this was an incredible question because, full disclosure, I've had to work through some of this, but the question was, how do you respect and love your parents and families when they've either damaged or are damaging your mental health? And I think that was the exact question. I want to rephrase it a little bit because, and you are probably going to do this, I'm probably taking the words out of your mouth, but I feel like that is it's kind of a negative way to ask the question. Not that that's what she meant. She was just being honest, and this was my question. But I think I know as a parent, I'm sure, especially Brian and I are pastors, and I have anxiety, depression, and borderline. So I'm sure we are aiding in the damaging of our kids' mental health, but you don't set out to damage it. So I think it's one of those things environmentally, a lot of times our parents have come from different situations. And anyways, I'm gonna let you answer the question, but how do we walk through that with our families, especially as those of us who are struggling are going to be going home for the holidays? How do we interact with our families? How do we talk about our mental health without getting them upset? What would you say to that question?
So a lot of times, in helping people with families that can be, prickly sometimes. It's with anything, we have to protect ourselves. And, so having good boundaries, sometimes, setting boundaries in a relationship is very important. Making sure that there is love and respect for each other, but also for ourselves too. And, sometimes we may have parents that are a little overbearing, or they're still very critical of ourselves. And especially as we, look at more like a young adult age, and kids are kind of coming into finding their identity and finding, where they fall, and where their values and beliefs line up. And maybe sometimes don't line up with parents. So kind of knowing, what are the landmines to kind of not step on, because that's going to be something that, blows up Christmas dinner or something. But, having a healthy boundary of, I'm not going to do things to provoke them. And if they do anything that kind of is provoking or triggering to me, that I can kind of say, hey, let's not go there. Let's keep it about, having a nice holiday dinner together or whatever. But it can be very polarizing sometimes. And, that's where, having love, love is the thing that, drives us all. And so having that love for each other, and, I love you and I care about you and I want to have a good relationship with you. But we have to kind of, follow these boundaries, and in order for our relationship to stay healthy.
And what would you say, that's incredible advice. I know I've had to even follow some of that in my own life, and now have a great relationship with my parents, which took a lot of work. I'm being super honest in this interview. So, but what would you say to people that are like, which is what I like and what I ask people to do, so I'm doing it too. But what would you say to people who are like, okay, if I'm setting up the boundaries, then am I ignoring certain things? Are we just brushing things under the rug by not addressing things? Am I able to be my true self then? Because some people want to land on those landmines because, that may be them expressing themselves. Like I've, for instance, I've had a couple of friends who have come out recently in the past couple of months, and their parents are not necessarily incredibly supportive of that. Or, if someone goes through a major life transformation and they're dealing with a bunch of stuff, and so they've come out with like, okay, I'm battling with depression, I'm battling with anxiety. So how do we avoid those landmines while still being true to ourselves, and then also making sure we're not just brushing things under the rug?
Well, and that's where that second piece, that love piece, comes in. And loving the person regardless, both for, in the situation we're talking about, the parent, but also for the child as well, the maybe adult child, loving their parents, and saying, hey, listen, I love you and I care about you, but every time I come around you, it's prickly, and I don't like that. This is the feelings that it brings up. This is the emotions that it brings up. And let's try to work through this. And that's where, maybe going to counseling, maybe having, meeting with a pastor, whatever it is, but maybe meeting with a mediator to kind of help navigate that. Or maybe there's another parent, I know sometimes, a mom and a dad, and a mom and a child may be conflicting. And so, hey, let's bring dad in as the spiritual head, to kind of maybe help mediate this discussion. But if it's mom and dad are kind of maybe on the same and opposing the child, then maybe bringing in an outside person to kind of help with leading that discussion and kind of helping with some, just some basic conflict resolution. And sometimes we have to end up agreeing to disagree on a certain situation, or a change of differences of opinions or differences of values. So it can be very difficult sometimes with that.
This is so good, Mike. And I think exactly what you're saying, like the love piece. I think sometimes, especially when we're talking to parents specifically, if you know, like one of your children or your adult children is coming home and they've gone through a major transformation of some sort, I think choosing what you've said, loving that child for that child, and because at this point, like the raising of the child, if they're an adult, that's done. Now it's just coming alongside of them and supporting them and being with them and finding ways, even if you're not in agreement with all of their decisions, finding ways to support them. You don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because they may be doing something you don't agree with doesn't mean that you can't support them in other ways. So, okay.
The
So
other
then
thing,
the
other thing, just real quick. The
yes,
other
please
thing,
do.
is I like Kevin am huge on the relationship, and whenever you have that loving relationship, it's a lot easier to speak into someone's life and to have that connection with them. If it is a family dinner and you only ever talk to this person at Thanksgiving dinner, then there's not much of a relationship there.
Yeah.
And so, is this relationship worth a big fight at Christmas dinner every year? No, it maybe isn't worth that. So if we have that relationship throughout the year, then you know what, next time I see you, if it's at Christmas time, maybe we can have a better discussion about this and coming from that love approach. So
that is such a good point, is like, when you're dealing with someone, and this could be a family relationship, friend relationship, whatever, but when you're dealing with someone that you're concerned about and you want to speak into their life, have you done the work of building the relationship? That's huge, because sometimes I think we think just because we know someone or we've rubbed shoulders with them that we can speak into their lives about everything, and it's like, no, you have to earn the right to be in relationship, to speak to someone. And I mean, this can go even, we just had, this may be a surprise to you, Mike, but we just had the election last week, and surprise. So I can only imagine.
I'm wondering if maybe some of these were, political discussions at Christmas dinner.
Yes, that just came to my mind. It wasn't at first, and then I'm just like, holy crap, I bet there's going to be a lot of political discussions. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming up. 2020 has been a volatile year. I have never been, I'm only 35, so who knows? Brian's older than me, so I keep asking him, like, have you ever been through a year like this? Like, has it ever been like this? I know history repeats itself, but this has been wild. So if there's ever been a season where I'm just trying to prepare a lot of my readers and listeners and readers, like, the holidays, this could be a volatile time. So we've got to go in and we've got to really be prepared, to avoid these things so that we can have a really incredible season. So, okay. So then the next question is, I feel like we've kind of addressed that. How does someone bring up the subject without offending the family? So let's say, I guess, like, and I think we've kind of addressed this. So like if someone, and I think this happens a lot of times for those of us who are hurting or who are going through major life transformations. Like I remember after my diagnoses and, you go through this season of like, do I tell everybody? Do I not tell everybody? And, I want people who are close to me to know that I'm struggling. But then how much do I say? And what if they can't accept it? And for me, my diagnosis came about 10 years ago. And I feel like there's been a lot of work done in the church and in Christian circles with mental health over the past 10 years. We've taken some major strides, because before it was something no one wanted to address. It was just sin issues, But even back just 10 years ago, me seeing a counselor and me getting diagnosed with anxiety and depression, it was like, and I have people who are very close to me make fun of the fact that I was seeing a counselor and would use it as a joke. Well, why don't you just go talk to Kevin about that, And so, but what would you say to someone that maybe just recently got a diagnosis or just recently is walking through life transformation? Is, Thanksgiving and Christmas, the holidays, is this the time to just kind of drop that bombshell? Or how do they go about telling people that they're closest to? And I think a lot of times in this case, it's family, about what they're walking through.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's, it's kind of, as I like to say, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
It's something that, if your family knows you, they may already have some inklings themselves.
Yeah.
And so, coming in and saying, hey, listen, I have this diagnosis, or, I've been seeing a coach that's kind of been helping me out with, some stuff in life. And one of the things we discussed was, I'm anxious, or I'm
Mm,
depressed, or I
mm.
have ADHD, or whatever it may be, but bringing that to light. And so, once again, relationship with family, if
Mm.
you have that good relationship with family, hopefully they're loving and caring and understanding of that, and will discuss that with you. And it's something that I promote all the time, is we always ask about, our medical family tree,
Yeah,
and do we have any relatives with high blood pressure, any of those kind of things. But we also need to be discussing our mental health tree. And do
yeah,
we have any, and yeah, everybody always has that crazy Aunt Susan, but let's talk about crazy Aunt Susan.
yeah, yeah.
Did she have depression, or did she have some serious mental health issue? Was that something that we need to discuss? And how does that affect? Because genetics is sometimes involved in mental health
Yeah.
diagnosis. And so, understanding some of those things, and but also helping our kids understand
Mm,
that it's okay to have a mental health diagnosis.
mm-hmm.
I have anxiety and ADHD, and it's something that I've talked to my kids about. You know, I have a son that has ADHD, and and we talk about those things, and
Yeah, yeah,
I'm able to kind of share in that struggle, and
yeah.
talk to him about some things that I had to do in life, and some skills that I had to develop, that hopefully he is also going to develop, that might work for him. So
Yeah. I do the same thing. And that's been something I've been asked is like, how early do you start talking to your kids? So I have an 8-year-old, that's my daughter, and then Ryder is 6, Braxton is 4, and Case is 1. And so with Brooke and Ryder specifically, because they're old enough to understand if I'm going through a season where I'm exceptionally anxious, because usually if I'm anxious, I'm short with them or I'm short with Bryant, and they see it. And kids are intuitive. And one of the things I had learned speaking to another counselor in one of these interviews is like the more you explain to children what's going on, the least likely they'll be to blame themselves because kids are intuitive. They're aware when things are not right. And if you aren't having the conversations with them about why things aren't right, they're going to start to think that they're the problem. And so my kids, I've been honest with Brooke and with Ryder about mommy's anxiety. And I don't know that they fully even understand what anxiety is, but I just say like, mommy's not feeling well. And it makes mommy mean sometimes. And mommy is sorry and is really working on it and is going to go see Mr. Kevin. Like they all know Mr. Kevin too.
yeah,
So,
I love that.
but what is, I think, so kind of so we're going to start talking about kids now specifically, but how would so I have mental illness and I've talked with my parents a lot about my mental illness. And it is something that I think does run generationally in our family. And I think at times it's been difficult for my parents to come to grips with that because I think sometimes then they feel as though they have failed or they're failing because, if it's generational, they failed in recognizing it in themselves and then seeing it in me. So when we're talking to our parents about like, hey, this is something I'm struggling with, how do we discuss it with them and take the onus on ourselves so that we're not piling on with them? Do you know what I'm saying? And then how do we almost help them realize that like, listen, like, yeah, maybe this is something you didn't see or didn't deal with, but we're also in a broken world. This isn't entirely your fault. So how do we manage that
Yeah,
with not making them feel like a failure or guilt or whatever for us struggling?
yeah. Well, and, everyone's life experience is a little different. Yes, genetics does have a role in mental health, but so does environment. So does the
Yeah.
environment we grow up in. So does a lot of what was modeled for us at home.
Mm,
Our own body chemistry is different. And
yeah.
so sometimes we develop things a little bit differently. So, talking to parents and kind of letting them know that it's not their fault.
Mm.
It's nothing that they did. But at the flip side too, there are sometimes things that parents do that is
Yeah.
detrimental to a child's mental health.
Yeah.
Having worked in in the foster care world for so long, there's a lot on attachments and a lot on, kind of those infancy and developmental changes that occur, and kind of learning those relationships as they grow up. And also for an older person, a young adult, talking to their parents about their mental health,
Yeah.
that's where, there is opportunity for forgiveness sometimes. Say,
So good.
hey, listen, maybe we didn't have the best childhood growing up, but I'm not going to hold that against you.
Yeah.
It's helped me develop into the person that I am today.
Yeah.
Kind of finding that silver lining
Yeah.
on the cloud, and kind of saying, I wouldn't change anything about my childhood. It's interesting that you're bringing this up, because this is very, very personal to me as well. I was never diagnosed whenever I was a kid, and it wasn't until whenever I went into grad school that I was kind of able to go, that's what's wrong with me. Now I know. And so talking to my parents about it, and my parents even saying, hey, listen, we're sorry for the way that we raised you and did stuff. And I said, no, that is not it at all.
Yeah.
I love the way that I was raised, and I am the person I am because of what I experienced in my childhood. And I'm glad for those things. A lot can be learned in adversity. And a lot can be learned through, trial and error, and what we had to go through growing up to get to the point where we are, where now we can say, I get it.
Yeah. And I talk to a lot of people about that, is like getting to the place where you can own your mental illness. So it's not something that you're fighting against, but working with almost, and it doesn't define you, but it becomes your story. It becomes something that you are sharing with others. Look at the adversity, look at what I've had to get through to be who I am today. And so I think there's a lot of, I love the forgiveness aspect of it, but in order to offer the forgiveness, there's a season of owning it and not fighting against it. I talk to so many people that are just, I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to have this diagnosis. And it's like, well, too late. You have it. So are you going to spend your whole life bemoaning it? Or are you going to figure out, how you're going to muscle through it and get to the other side, So
one of the things I talk to people about in trauma work, but also in lots of other things too, is, are you going to be that victim? Or are you going to be that survivor? Or are you going to become that overcomer? And that overcomer piece is that acceptance. We kind of have accepted what has happened in our life. And we overcame it. And now we can use that as a platform for helping others. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what my whole life has become about, since walking through all my diagnosis. Brian and I were married for about a month, and then he had just become lead pastor. And then we get all of these diagnoses. And at that point, like I said earlier, we just felt so alone, because this was not something that was discussed in the church, in Christian circles at all. And so we took a while before we talked about it. And then I preached a message about 2 years ago. And that was the first time in front of our church from start to finish that I told my whole story.
I love that message. I saw it. It was really good.
That is sweet of you to say. And then just even a couple months after that, my brother commits suicide. And so then we were sharing that story. But I think we made the commitment that if God, I don't believe I'm healed. I believe I'm healthy. I don't believe I'm healed. And I don't know that this side of heaven, God's going to heal me. And that's fine. That's not his fault. We're in a broken world. I'm going to struggle with this stuff. But we promised, if we got healthy enough, me individually and us as a married couple, that we would share our stories so people wouldn't feel alone. And that is one thing that, even the reason for this podcast called Scar Stories, is I want to hear how people have overcome things. And so now they can share their story to be an encouragement to other people. And so let's ask, I want to kind of scooch into, I have kids, you have kids, a lot of my friends have kids. And so first of all, why is it so important to get so this is a two-part question. Why is it so important to get our kids into counseling? And then what are some tall tale signs that we should be looking for to put them into counseling? Because let's just be straight. It's if we're wondering whether or not a child, kids are difficult, because sometimes it's what's cognitive and what's just behavioral, them just being a 6-year-old, and then what's a like, oof, we probably need to deal with that before that gets out of hand. I think that's something Brian and I are always kind of struggling with and working through. One thing I'm always talking to Kevin about, like, okay, at what point do I go see Mike again with Brider or whichever kid it is? And at what point are we handling it okay at home? That's something Kevin and I talk about you all the time. Like, when do I go see Mike again?
Yeah.
And it's also difficult, because we're in such a busy world. So like you guys are 45 minutes away. So it's also trying to decide, I am more than willing. I will drive it every week if I need to with him. But I also, we've got to be realistic. So
Right.
So it's why is it so important to get our kids into counseling? And then what should we be looking for to know, okay, this is more than we can deal with at home. We need to partner with someone.
Well, a lot of times, therapists, what we do is we look at the frequency, and
We're about
then
to be interrupted by a little visitor here. Oh, okay. He's running out. My 4-year-old's here. I'm always like, oh boy, what's going to happen? Okay. He ran out. Okay. Say that again. You said something about frequency. I blanked out as soon as he walked in.
that's okay. So a lot of what we look at is the frequency, and then also the level of impairment. And I know that sounds like a scary word, like, oh my gosh, impairment. But whenever we're looking at mental health diagnosis, we look at, how is this impacting their daily functioning? How is this impacting their life? And so for a little kid, if they have a temper tantrum and throw a big fit in the grocery store, but it's a one-time thing, then okay, it was a one-time thing. Maybe they're having a bad day. We all have bad days or off days.
Hold on 1 second, Mike. This is day 2 of getting interrupted. I can't do it right now. You need to go do something else. Shut the door. Shut the door, please. Okay. All right. This is my real life.
Totally okay.
You go down and you can turn one on. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so level of intensity, level of frequency, I'm following you.
Right. So, if it's something that only happens one time, then okay, it's no big deal. If it happens twice, okay. If it starts happening on a frequency, and if we see that is intensifying or is getting worse, then okay, now this is maybe something that needs to be a concern.
Yeah.
And especially, in this year, and I know we're probably going to talk about it more later, but whenever we're looking at stress and the stress level, and if stress just kind of continues to compound and things continue to build, then okay, this is increasing in frequency, and it's causing more of an impairment. So this is something we definitely need to bring them in for counseling. Same with mood as well, and any kind of behavior issues. If it's a behavior, like I said, that only happens once or twice, maybe no big deal. But if it's a behavior that just kind of continues to escalate and continues, usually I like to say about a 3-month kind of notion that, okay, has this gone on beyond 3 months?
Okay.
Where was this a week ago? Where was this a day ago? Where was this a couple months ago? And where is it now? And if it's kind of building in that frequency and becoming more impaired, then yeah. And of course, with our teenage kids, everybody has, moody teenagers, but whenever we're looking at that mood and kind of, okay, where is that frequency of that mood? Is this just, a hormonal kind of a mood shift, and every single month or every single time that this kind of comes up, we can kind of say, okay, this is maybe the cause of it. But if we're struggling as parents to kind of find what the cause is, or if we're struggling as parents to kind of understand the stress of our kid, then it's a good time to bring them in and try to get some outside help, a professional to kind of sit in and kind of give some guidance to the parents, but also to the kids on how to do it. So.
Yeah. And I think like we're so quick, we a lot of times we'll go to blogs or books or whatever, but then when it comes to seeing a counselor, it's like, I don't know if it's in our minds as parents, like we feel like we've failed, or we don't want to accept that our kids, and our minds are like, if I have to take them to a counselor, that means they're broken. Like, and it's kind of like, newsflash, we're all broken, but I think just that fear of like, oh man, what if something is majorly wrong with my kid? I know a lot of times people especially, for whatever reason in the past couple of years, autism and Asperger's, and everyone's nervous about that and everyone's concerned about that. And so I think sometimes they even get afraid to go see a counselor because what if we get this diagnosis that we're not ready for? And so what would you say to a parent who's like, gosh, I do think I need to get my child in, but I'm afraid of what we may discover. I'm afraid of what we may find out.
Yeah. So I have so many clients that come in and, they see my office, they see the view of the lake, they see my toys and, video games, and they're just kind of like, this is not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times that first session is just kind of getting comfortable to the therapy, environment and what that's going to look like. There is so many things out there on the internet, and there's so many YouTube videos, and there's so many of therapists. And so, trying to, expose your kid to that ahead of time and kind of saying, okay, this is probably what they're going to look like, or probably what the environment is going to be. One of the things that I do is on our Facebook page, we have pictures of our office so that people can kind of see what it looks like.
Oh, I love that.
That does help alleviate some of the anxiety of kind of what is it going to look like? What's this environment going to be? Who is this person? A lot of times I explain to, parents, I have parents call and say, hey, can the therapist call just before they come in? Of course, because we want to make sure that it's going to be a positive experience for them. I've talked to kids before they even come in for their first session, just to kind of, a little introduction, the same thing that I kind of said before we started talking, introduction about myself, but also kind of tell them, hey, you may have played a sport before. You've had a soccer coach, you've had a basketball coach, whatever. I'm kind of like that. Not that I'm a life coach, but I'm here to help coach you in life kind of stuff, to talk about your thoughts, to talk about feelings, to talk about pretty personal stuff, but in a helpful therapeutic environment, to help you become a better person.
And what all are you able to share with the parent? Like if you've had a really enlightening, because I know, so for me, I've signed all these papers. So when I go in, I mean, Kevin can't even talk to Bryant unless I give him permission, right. I think that's a big thing everyone's concerned about is confidentiality. So you guys cannot share a blip of anything that goes on in those four walls unless people sign releases. So what happens with children then, if because I know so we, for instance, our experience, we brought Ryder in and you played Legos with Ryder. So first I had Ryder's headphones on and he was doing his iPad and we talked and I shared our concerns and we took his iPad away and you got on the floor and played Legos with him. And when we got done, you shared some of your thoughts with us. And I'm going to tell you, it was just, one of the things you noticed was his lack of confidence. And that was so eye-opening for us. And so from that point on, we've really been focusing on his confidence. And then also I realized that me coddling him, because I noticed he had a lack of confidence. So I thought me coddling him was going to help his confidence, but I was realizing that was deteriorating his confidence. So it was so helpful for us. But what in those situations, after the initial counseling appointment with the parent and the child, when just the child's going, what are you able to share with the parent? If you have an eye-opening, appointment with them, are you able to share that with the parent, or legally, what does that look like?
Yeah, so and it's a huge discussion in our field as far as confidentiality with kids and teenagers, and especially elementary age kids.
Yes.
And how do you maintain that therapeutic confidence that, hey, this is someone that I can trust and talk to about things. And then how do you address, things that, hey, I'm a parent. If my kid went in and saw somebody, I would kind of want to know what was going on. So the way that I always discuss it with my clients is that, as I said, talking about our thoughts and feelings, that's a pretty personal stuff. And it's not nice for me to share your personal information. So but you
We will.
it all means talk to them, tell them how it was, tell them how things went.
Yeah.
Did we freeze up?
We did. Yes, you are frozen. I heard you say, tell them how things went. Can you still hear me?
Yep, it's all good.
There you go. Okay.
So talking to kids about, it's okay for them to talk about with their parents what we did in therapy and how things went, but I'm not going to share what they discussed with me. Now, your parent does have a right to know kind of how you're progressing in therapy, how things are going, how is the service that they're paying for. So I'm going to discuss about general things. So we might talk about we're working on school, or we're working on, this behavior or this thing. But as far as specifics of their thoughts.
Uh-oh. This is what happens when you guys have an office right by a little pond. Are you there? Mike? Can you hear me? Oh, there you are. You're like breaking up.
Okay.
There you are. I can hear you.
All right, everything is closed off on my end, so.
Okay, we can hear you. You're just frozen, but you'll catch up, I think.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, the being in an office complex, there's lots of people using the internet all at the same time. So.
Yeah, well, that's fine. We've got you look like you're in an action shot, so we'll just keep going, and then you'll probably unfreeze at some point. So, oh, there you are. Yay. Okay, well, I love that. I think that'll be really helpful for parents, especially as they're considering getting their kids in, like, okay, what is going to be able to be told me? And even as they're talking to some of their older kids, like, hey, you can feel freedom to go in and discuss anything because they're not going to be able to tell me, so.
Right.
Okay, so
now, I do tell kids, just to add to that, I do tell kids, and usually that's in our first session that I have the discussion with the parents and with the child both present. And we talk about, what are certain circumstances where I am going to tell that information. And of course, if they're a danger to themselves or others, those are things that I am going to, but I'm not just going to be like, oh, I'm going to go, rat you out to your parents. That's a discussion that I have with the client, and I kind of say, hey, I think this is something that we need to bring your mom or your dad in on, and I think this is something that we need to include them in this conversation. And so those are times that I might say, hey, come on back, let's just open together. So that way it's not necessarily speech in confidence, it is.
It was so good through the first half. Let me know when you can hear me again. I heard you say breach of confidence was the end of that.
Is able to. I've got you good. So.
You there?
Here.
Okay. Yeah, you're frozen again, but we can hear you. There you are. Okay. So you said the breach, and I think that's so helpful also for parents to know about if they're concerned about self-harm or something like that, that you would bring them in on that, but bring the kid along with that. That's so helpful. Okay, so we're right at the end of our time. I think the last question, and you addressed this a little bit, but I just want to, how have you found that kids are processing 2020? Like as parents, now we're a very open family, Brian and I, and it's just something we've just, I guess, both come by naturally. So like we've been very honest with our kids about coronavirus, and we don't let them say many things are stupid or many things suck, but we do let them say like COVID sucks, COVID's stupid, because that just kind of lets them get their angst out about it. Like Disney World was shut down for a while, and all that, like the park is still shut down, like the things that they like to do. So I'm like, you know what, you can be mad at this, that's fine, even politically, and Brian and I made a commitment, we have so many people in our church from every angle, so we've never come out and said where we land politically, but my 8-year-old is learning in social studies at school about presidential elections. And so she asked us, who did you vote for? And so I've had very honest conversations with her about that and how I feel about, people in leadership and how I feel they should handle themselves and those sorts of things. So we have very honest conversations, and I don't feel like our kids have struggled as much this year. In fact, it's funny because we went through a terrible year last year, losing my brother and Bryant's mom, and I had a very high risk pregnancy. And so this year, even with COVID, it's kind of been like, okay, this hasn't been that bad. So even for our kids, like my kids are thriving in school this year and all those things. But, how are kids processing, and how as parents can we help our kids process this year as they're watching and probably feeling the stress of us at home? Like what are some thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I talk to parents a lot about, modeling, and what you
Mhm.
model for your kids is important.
Yeah.
If you're, upset and angry and yelling and screaming at the TV and all of this kind of stuff in the news, then your kids are seeing that. And,
Yeah.
what are they learning from what you're modeling?
Yeah.
How are you as a parent handling, work being shut down, being
Mm.
quarantined, working from home, all of these adjustments that we as parents have had to make. How are you modeling for your kids how to handle the transitions and the changes that have happened?
Mm.
Um, I will say that kids are very resilient.
Yeah.
Having worked in the foster care industry for many years, I've seen kids go through some horrendous situations, but they're very resilient.
Mm.
So I think that kids will be resilient from 2020, but
Yeah.
they also are learning how to, adapt to change and adapt
Mm.
to things that are beyond their control. So once again, like we spoke before about, what is the silver linings that they're learning from this?
Yeah.
What are the good things
Yeah.
that our
Uh-oh.
kids are able to? There is a lot of stress going on. I will say that, as a therapist,
It's like always when you're about to do the really good points. Are you there? For those of you
definitely
that,
seen us here.
there you go. I was going to say, for those of you that don't know, I'm in Valrico and he's in Lakeland, and there's a hurricane going by the coast. So I wonder too if like all the wind and the weather is also messing with us too. It's not raining right now, but there's been wind where I am. But you said as a therapist, you said you're about to talk about the stress, and you said as a therapist.
Yeah. So as a therapist, I definitely have seen an increase in the number of new clients coming in during this time, and we see this often. As you
Yeah.
just said, living in Florida, we have hurricanes, and we see lots of people that after a hurricane they come in from PTSD from that.
Yeah.
Kids this year, everything from last summer or last spring. Now I'm being quarantined at home. I have to stay in home, and we can't leave the house, and kind of the stress of that.
Mm.
And okay, now we can kind of start to go out, and kids in my class are kind of there for a week, and then they're gone for a
Mm.
couple of weeks, and oh, this kid has COVID, and my teacher is here, and now she got quarantined. All of these things,
Yeah.
how are we modeling handling that with our kids? And
Yeah.
it's okay, we're going to get through this. Having that trust and that faith, in God, if that's your belief, but that there are good things that can come out of this. And
Mm.
like we said before, what are we learning? We're
Yeah.
learning how to be resilient. We're learning
Yeah.
how to adapt to change and to
Yeah.
things beyond our control sometimes, and how we can handle that.
Yeah. And I love that. I love so much of, I think, like, making it through life and being the overcomer that you said it is reframing situations. And so, yeah, I think one of the things Brian and I've talked a lot about is like, okay, there's not a blasted thing we can do about coronavirus, and there's not a blasted thing we can do about, all of the other things going on in our world right now. But we can either bemoan it, or just like we can be a victim, like you said, survive it, or we can overcome it. And so I think just constantly having, honest conversations with our kids, and then just getting creative. I'm a big person about being creative. Like if, so Mondays, this is just a really silly example, but Mondays, my kids get home at 12:55. They get home at 12:55. So I am alone with 4 kids from 12:55 until 4:30. Brian comes home at 4:30 on Mondays. Thank you, Jesus. And so I'm always like, I always tell Brian, like, what am I going to do with 4 kids by myself, that all need mommy. And so I'm a big like decorate early for Christmas person. So my house is all decorated. So I was like, you know what? Let's set the mood. I turned on Christmas music on all the TVs. And I was like, we're going to do homework with Christmas music on because that's just going to reduce the stress. And then we'll bake a little bit. And it ended up being a really cool day yesterday. Ryder went to bed saying, this was the best day ever. And it was like just little things. And so I think like, even through Corona and stuff, I remember like when I started realizing that we were going to be quarantined, I'm like, okay, I'm hopping on Amazon and I'm buying some outdoor stuff. Like we're going to get some inflatables and we're going to, and so we bought some stuff for the backyard, and because I knew we were going to be out there a lot. And so we've made some really great memories in our backyard, and then there's been like a lot of fun, movies that have come out. And so we've had movie nights with forts and movie nights with pizza. And so I think you're exactly right. It's all about our perspective. And I'm going to steal that, but I'll obviously quote you. But are we going to be a victim? Are we going to survive? Or are we going to overcome it? I love that. Yeah. Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. I think this is going to be so valuable for people because I know when it comes to mental health with our kids, it's something that I'm always monitoring. I'm always concerned about. And so, but I think like just some of your insight and the wisdom you've shared is just so helpful. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. So.
Well, we'll have you again, I'm sure, because I bet this one's going to blow up. So, all right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.